Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I trust y'all had a good Passover. And I think I'm mostly healed until the next episode with this hernia.
Right.
Why don't they just operate on it?
We were kind of wondering the same darn thing.
Yeah, because
earlier.
this is the second time I've been to the hospital with this. The first time, Travis carried me down 2 flights of stairs out of the bathroom. Yeah.
Not bathroom, bachelor.
And then this time, the ER doc popped it back in, and I like came off the table. It didn't feel real good when he had the whole thing in his left hand like this. I was not breathing very well then. And then he said, I think I can get this in there. It's like, oh God. But he did. So today we're going to talk about something that there's a lot of debate about. On a level, most people that just go to synagogue and everything, they don't ever really get to what we're going to be talking about today, because they're used to going to church and you don't question anything. So there are actually, and we're going to look at each one of them, well, probably not too much, but we're going to brush the 3 ways to look at the time that we're in right now. Does anybody know the time that we're in right now?
Counting of the Omer.
The counting of the Omer. And I told Teresita this morning, every time I hear that, I think of Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
Not counting homers, counting omers, O-M-E-R. And the confusion is not whether we should count the Omer or not, but rather, where do you start?
And what does it mean?
Huh?
What does it really mean?
The Omer? That's a good question.
I know you're supposed to count, but what's
The Omer is one day's provision. And it was the amount of grain that you take for the wave sheaf offering. Omer actually means sheaf. So it's the grain that you would give as a first fruits offering. It's one day's provision. And they take that and make 2 loaves out of it. And the high priest waves the sheaf offering, before Yahweh. And interesting enough, one question I ask people, and they go, never really thought about that. But when Yeshua was resurrected, was not on Easter morning, right? We all know that. He was resurrected on the 3rd day of the week. But Mary couldn't touch him. When she saw him outside the tomb, she thought he was the gardener. And she went to embrace him, and he goes, "You can't touch me." Yet there was a period of time that passed, and when he appeared specifically to Thomas and the other disciples behind the locked doors, he told Thomas to handle him. So, remember, Thomas said, "I won't believe until I can that," and then Yeshua had him do each one of those so he could believe. The question is, why could Mary not touch him and Thomas could? Good question, huh? Anybody want to bite on that for a minute?
Well,
It has something to, I don't recall exactly, it has something to do with the fact that she would have made him unclean because of the timing.
Yes, she would have. Why was that important?
ascended to the Father to put the blood on the altar?
He had very close to that. He had to be the high priest, because he is the high priest, and do the wave sheaf offering from the first of the harvest. After he did that, then people could touch him and handle him, and it was okay. But he had to stay pristine to be able to go before the Father and do the wave sheaf offering. While I'm talking, Teresita, you might look for this. It's in Matthew. There's a piece of scripture in Matthew that's pretty obscure, and people usually bounce right over it. And that is in the death scenario of Matthew's gospel, of Yeshua on the cross. In the midst of that narration, he breaks away and says that people saw their loved ones, their dead loved ones, walking in the streets of Jerusalem. It's out of place, so people usually don't comment on it, but that's about gathering the first fruits of the resurrection for Yahweh. That happened when Yeshua emptied out paradise. And then he took those people and waved them before the Father.
So they went to heaven?
Huh?
So they went to heaven?
Yes. And I don't think anymore, people have asked me this, well, where's paradise now? I don't think there is a paradise. I think Yeshua emptied it, and there's no need for that now. You got it? Okay, read that for us.
And Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many.
Yeah. So they do note it with a parenthetical statement that it was coming out of the graves after his resurrection. But if you read that, it sounds like it happened in the moment that he died. Right? Or is it just me?
No, that's what it sounds like to me too.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't say, that he gave up the spirit, and the way it reads to me is at that moment, the veil was split, the rocks split open, the graves were emptied, were opened,
Right.
the saints rose,
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So, Yeshua did fulfill Passover to the day, hour, and moment. We kind of look at that when we do the Haggadah. So he also fulfilled unleavened bread, right? Taking the sin away. He also fulfilled first fruits. And this is one of the scriptures that support that. So the spring feast, Yeshua has fulfilled. And the ones that we're waiting on are Shavuot. It's been fulfilled, a partial fulfilling in Acts chapter 2. And that lines up with Joel chapter 2. But there's a bigger, the former and the latter rain. if you read in Joel chapter 2. So, so those feasts, the spring feasts have been fulfilled, the summer feast partially, Feast of Trumpets, Sukkot, and Day of Atonement, those have not been fulfilled yet. We're still waiting on those in a prophetic stance. But specifically, what the first fruit sacrifice represents is the beginning of the barley harvest. The beginning of the barley harvest. Shavuot, what would you think harvest is around Shavuot?
Wheat.
It's the wheat harvest. So first fruits is barley harvest. Shavuot is the wheat harvest. And you remember the parable with the grain and the tares, the wheat and the tares. Well, that's Shavuot. And then we go into the fall, and the fall feasts are grapes, the grape harvest. The olives, I think, are harvested then. And so each one of these oat feasts are represented by a feast. So, anybody remember what an oat is?
I do not.
Kerosene Force can tell you what an oat was. An oat is an outward and visible sign. That's what an oat is. So as we have these three oat feasts, Shavuot, Matzot, Shavuot, and Sukkot, those are pilgrimage feasts. What do we call the pilgrimage feast? Y'all are easy.
Hagim.
There you go, Hagim.
Shout them out, Nina.
Hagim. And that is the pilgrimage. Where are we pilgrimage into? Where are we going on the pilgrimage?
Jerusalem, the homeland. Yeah.
Jerusalem. We're going to Temple Mount. And the reason we're going to Temple Mount is because that's where, actually the temple is where Yahweh put his name. So all that's left now is Temple Mount, but they were going to Temple Mount to do the wave sheaf offering. That's also the place that they killed the lamb. Here's a question for you. So you go to Temple Mount and have your lamb killed. The next day starts unleavened bread. How can you make it home in one day, because the lambs are killed at twilight, right? How can you make it home, do Passover, and then go back to Temple Mount for the wave sheaf offering?
Time travel.
Didn't a lot of people stay in Jerusalem?
That's what I would think. I would think that they would have a place that they did Passover as a family, and that they would just stay there for unleavened bread and first fruits. Remember, Yeshua told his disciples what? What did he tell his disciples? Stay in Jerusalem. Right? When he appeared to them after the resurrection, he said, stay in Jerusalem. So I would imagine a lot of people would do that. But the apostles were scared to death. That's why they were behind locked doors, because they figured, well, they crucified him and he was our leader. Where does that leave us? You know, not in a very good shape. So they were behind locked doors. Well, today we're going to look at making your count. And there are actually two different ways to count to get to Shavuot. We know what those are?
50 days or 7 weeks.
So it's 50 days. That's why the church calls it Pentecost, right? Penta, being,
Oh, no, that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah.
You guys just
You can almost see that one.
spotlight right there.
Yep, that was mine. So yes, we can count 50 days, count the Omer, 50 Omers. What's the other way? You brushed on it. You count the Sabbaths, right? How many Sabbaths should pass?
7.
Right, 7. 7 Sabbaths and a day.
I was gonna say, because that's only 49 and 7 Sabbaths, right?
Yeah. So 7 Sabbaths and a day. So let's take a look at Psalm 81, 3 through 4. This is where there's a division in the feast days. For sure, Matzot, Shavuot, and Sukkot are Moedim, but they're a particular kind of Moedim. They are Hagim, pilgrimages. And so we find Psalm 81:3. It's very interesting. You want to read that for us, Darla?
I was eating a cookie. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast day. For this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob.
Okay. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon. Now remember, I've said previously that new moon, and let's just go there with the interlinear. New moon is Kodesh, the dark days. Let's take a look at that. Yep, Kodesh. New moon, by implication, a month or monthly new moon. So it's the dark days. Let's take a look at 23:18. It is 23, the root word, Kodesh, is to be new, positively to rebuild. And so remember that the dark, when there was no moon in the sky, the ancients thought that it was recharging for the next cycle. So that's kind of puts an interesting twist on, let's go back to 81:3. So blow the trumpet at the dark moon. At the full moon are solemn feast days. So it's saying you blow the trumpet twice. Once in the dark moon, and once on our solemn feast days. Let's take a look and see what solemn feast days is. A festival, a Moedim. Let's look at 2287. Properly to move in a circle, to march in a sacred procession, to observe a festival. So it is a Hagim. That's the way they translated it in 1611, solemn feast day.
I find it interesting too, it says to be giddy, and then the King James is reel to and fro. Well, I mean, I think that kind of takes us back to, you know, we aren't supposed to be sitting around and both feasts, they're celebrations.
Right. It is, yeah.
They're supposed to be joyous and happy and giddy.
Yeah.
Eat lots of food.
Let's look at new moon while we're there. I mean, not new moon, but full moon. Is it there?
It's not in there.
It's just appointed.
The trumpet
Appointed on day.
in the appointed, in the time appointed. Instead of the full moon.
I guess it's a given.
So what is in the, what is that?
Well, there's the new moon.
Sure, whatever.
2320.
For that, yeah, what is that? Fullness of the full moon.
Yeah. The time appointed. That's actually kese, and it means the fullness, the very fullness. So let's go back to the text now. So we blow the trumpet at the dark moon, Kodesh, and Kese moon on our Hagim, for this is a statute for Israel, a law of Elohim of Jacob. So what does that tell us about the Hagim? Does it tell us anything?
Well, first of all, it's a statute.
If they're pilgrimages, then wouldn't you be blowing the trumpet to like tell those who are not there? This is the time, let's go.
Yes. But here's what I want you to get out of this. At the full moon, and he calls that full moon our solemn feast days. So he's saying the full moon on the Hagim. So remember, we count the moon for the Moedim, right? We've established that in a couple of different ways. We've established it in day 4 in Genesis chapter 1. And also, it establishes it in other scripture. But what this does is it ties the full moon to the Hagim. So we're counting the moon anyway, and on the Hagim, it should be a full moon. Why is that important, Tom? Well, it's important because that's a check for you to see if you're keeping the feast according to Father's timing. So
Your
if
count
you,
doesn't come up on a full moon,
Groff.
you drop the ball somewhere.
yeah, if you're celebrating Shavuot and there's not a full moon,
Time out.
something's wrong. Because when does matzah, when does unleavened bread start? On the 15th day, right?
Sunset.
There's full moon. Sukkot, when does it start? Huh?
On the 15th.
I couldn't hear you.
On the 15th day.
Whoa, that's right. From the upper level, you get the 15th day. Absolutely. So think of it like this. Matzot is on the 15th. Sukkot is on the 15th day. But Yahweh doesn't tell us what day Shavuot is. We'll take a look at that. Let's go to Leviticus 23. He does, however, tell us how to get there. He gives us the formula. And I think that was a fail-safe to make sure that only the people that were actually studying or have studied will be at Shavuot at the correct time. Now read 15 for us.
And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the seventh Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Lord. You shall bring from your dwelling 2 wave loaves, one of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. And you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs of the first year, without blemish, 1 young bull and 2 rams. They shall be as a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offering and their drink offering, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs of the first year as a sacrifice of a peace offering. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation to you. You shall do no customary work on it. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations.
Okay? So he tells us you gotta count, he tells us when to start counting, right? Because we need to know where 1 is. Count 50 days, that'd be the counting of the Omer, to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then from all your dwellings, 2 loaves of 2/10 of an ephah for the wave sheaf offering. And he tells us where to start. He says the day after Sabbath. Now remember, we're in unleavened bread. Let's just take a look at this real quick. Okay, now this is Yahweh's calendar, keep in mind. So we have the first sliver. So we actually see that the night before, right? So here's the sliver. This is day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sabbath, right? So on the 10th day of the first month, what do?
Bring the lamb.
Take the lamb into the home.
Very good. Bring the lamb into the home. And then the evening of Sabbath, which would, of the 14th day, would actually be evening time on the 13th day, because we start counting days in the evening. And so this is Passover. And it says the 15th day will be unleavened bread. It's also what?
Full moon.
It's full moon, and it's what they call a high Sabbath, a high Sabbath. But the moon is full. It's always full on the 15th day of the cycle. So that at the end of the Sabbath, is the Sabbath of unleavened bread. So what's that saying? It's saying that the 16th day is first fruits. It's the wave sheaf offering.
So did Yeshua rise on first fruits?
No, he
I must have heard that somewhere.
yeah, and see that fits very good with church theology, but they got it from somewhere, and the somewhere was Judaism, because it fits with using one calendar for your weekdays and another calendar for your month. So even in the calendar that's used today among the Orthodox, you could have the first day of the month on the 5th day of the week. So things get real convoluted there. But according to the rabbinic calendar, you have Passover, and then the first day of unleavened bread is the next day, right? Just like we do. The day after Passover begins unleavened bread. So that there's a lot of problems there. One, Passover is not on a Sabbath. Unleavened bread is, but it's the next day. If you count it according to Yahweh's calendar, this would be the 14th day is Passover, celebrated in the evening before, and then so counting of the Omer, actually, this is not wave sheaf here. Shabbat. So that's unleavened bread, the 16th to the 21st, and the 22nd day is first fruits. I'll do that later. So that starts as the sun goes down on the Sabbath of unleavened bread, because you see, that's the only Sabbath that it takes up, is the 21st day. So the day after the Sabbath of unleavened bread is first fruits, the wave sheaf offering. And this is where we start our count for either the Omer or the Sabbath. This would be, it's actually the fourth Sabbath, but that would be Sabbath 1. And then as we complete the other ones, we count 6, 7 of those, and then a day would be 50 days. So, also, as we're counting the Omer, we don't count the dark days. So when there is no moon in the sky, you don't count the Omer. And this is, I think this is where, it's been so long since I've looked at it, but I think this is where the rabbinic calendar gets off. Because if you count the sunlight period, first of all, we're told to count the moon for the Moedim. But on the Gregorian calendar, you're counting the sunlight days, you're counting physical days. But the command is to count the moon for the Moedim, so we're counting the moon. And so on these days, there is no moon. There was also no provision given on those days when the manna fell. They were actually given, I think Exodus calls it the bread of days, Yom Amim, the bread of days. So we don't count the dark days. And if you do it this way, it's the only way I've ever found that you get to the third month on the 15th day, which is a full moon. So just like with Passover, there's different countings, there's different ways to count the Omer. We're counting the same thing, but from different starting points. But you need to be able, whatever you do, here's the fail-safe, the check. You need to be at Shavuot on a full moon, because Psalm 81:3 says, Keseh, full moon, Hagim. So the Hagims are on the full moon. I wondered why that was at one point in my life, and I remembered my childhood on the farm, and you could go to the hay meadow when there wasn't any clouds and it was a full moon, and you could have read a newspaper, you know. And so they're on their pilgrimage, and the light is growing more and more in the sky, so they could see if they wanted to travel at night. They could. You could see. So, any questions so far? Have I lost anybody?
Clear as mud.
I think, I think the not counting the dark days is enlightening for me.
Yeah, and
It makes more sense.
I think that, and I drew out 2 calendars and had them side by side, and I think the problem is they're not on the full moon because they're counting the solar days.
Right.
And interesting enough, I was asked to come to a congregation and teach about the Ruach on Shavuot. And I got there, and it was dark, and I looked up, and the moon wasn't full. And that was the first time I went,
Right.
wonder why. Wonder why the moon's it's supposed to be full.
Did you use this last time we taught about the Omer, counting the dark days?
Oh, I may have, yeah.
We put up there if you want to see it.
You can zoom in on it real quick.
Yeah, let's pass that around because it's easier to see.
Bam. Did a lot of work on that.
Yeah, Terry Cedar did that.
Pretty cool.
So let's take a look at some scriptures. Okay, yeah, that's the command in Leviticus 23. So here is another mention. It's in Deuteronomy 16, 1 through 12. And it kind of states things differently. It says the same thing, but let's take a look.
Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night.
Okay, stop right there. We're going to take a look at this. Oh, there's the button.
Does it not work on there?
Yeah, it doesn't work on the screen, that's weird.
Let's try
It
this.
is weird.
Wonder if we can roll
Huh, that is strange.
it. That one does.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
The red might be.
Be careful, you're gonna open up a portal or something.
Yeah.
It's green,
Time
but
travel's
like-
real, right?
So twice it says the month of Abib, the month of Abib. And that sounds like a name, right? The month of Abib.
Who is that?
So the name of the first month is Abib. But let's look at what it's really saying. Let's go to the interlinear. Because there is no of there.
Observe. Month of.
So Shama or Et Kodesh Ha Abib. So the Abib, not of the Abib, but the month Abib. What does that mean? If it's not month of Abib, if it's not a specific name, what in the world is it? That's a
Good question, Tom.
So it's really month Abib. And this is really moon, right? If we take a look at it, which we will. It's the moon Abib. What does that mean? One of the things we believe is that when Adam ate the fruit that Yahweh said don't eat, and he fell, it wasn't just Adam fallen, right?
It was mankind.
It was the whole human race that fell. Why is that? It's because Hebrew thought, and I believe it, is that all the generations of the world were Abib in Adam, in his seed, because he was going to have babies, and they were going to have babies, and they were going to have babies, but it all goes back to Adam. And interesting enough, when they broke the DNA code in Europe, they did that. They shot it all the way back, and sure enough, all the different DNA of today comes from one man and one woman. And they proved that scientifically. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I find that amazing.
Yeah.
How does that go with like when Cain was sent out to land of Nod?
Mhm.
He had his descendants. Don't we still have people that came from him?
Nope.
No.
They died in the flood.
Okay.
They were wiped out.
Okay.
So now, flood was reset. I do think there was some old DNA that made it through the flood with Noah's sons' wives, because they took for themselves wives, right? So that's how I think, especially the Nephilim made it through the flood, was in their genetics. But that's a whole nother story. So Kodesh, new moon, dark moon, for Kodesh Abib, it would be the new moon, the renewed moon, but all the months are Abib in that moon, just like all the seed of the earth, all the generations of the earth were Abib in Adam when he fell. There are some places that it says month of Abib and of is in the text, but this isn't one of them. So this is talking about something totally different than a name. It's saying all the moons are Abib right here. So, okay. Looked at that. But wait, what is actually being said? Yeah.
That's the Abib.
Yeah. So this is when I hear Abib, this is automatically where my head goes. And so we know, if you've ever played with these, what are they called?
Nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls. And that's because they all nest in one another. Look at him go. So this one fits in this one, that fits in this one, that fits in this one, till we get there. And this one, we could say that the dolls are a bead in the big one.
Good analogy.
Right. So that's what we're talking about in this scripture, anyway. But there are some scriptures that is in the text. That's a lot of information.
So what did Abib mean?
Huh?
What did Abib mean?
Abib means green in the air, not ready for harvest. And there, there's confusion about everything. One of the things I saw on the internet that I kind of chuckled about is there was an argument about it, but it was a picture of a rock. And the caption said, "This is a rock. There should be no question." But there was, So, yeah, there's confusion on what Abib means. Let's go back right quick. Let's take a look at Abib, yeah. I'll read that for you.
From an unused root, meaning to be tender, green, i.e. a young ear of grain, hence the name of the month Abib or Nisan.
Yeah. It's a condition that they named a month after. And there are some, I will say, there are some places that it really is in the Hebrew text, month of Abib. But it's not here, but it's saying that this is month of Abib. And it means green in the ear, like I think of Johnson grass, because we baled that all the time. But a piece of Johnson grass, it's called booting up. It'll get to be a wide place on the stalk near the top. And that is the tassels on the Johnson grass. when it comes out of that boot. Another good way to look at it is corn. Because when corn first makes that ear, you can't pick it and eat it, can you? Because it's just little bitty blisters. It's not really kernels yet. Well, the condition of the corn is a bead. It's made the cob, but it's not ready for harvest. And there's a lot of rabbinics that say that a bead means ready for harvest, and obviously it does not. You can see it does not. Because there is a time, and unless you've been involved with these crops, you wouldn't know this, but so there is a time, and I think there's a chart somewhere on the internet, that there's so many days between germination and a boot, and so many days until that boot brings forth, and then so many days until the plant dies, and then then there's so many more days of drying out, because you cannot harvest the grain before it's dried out, because the moisture content of the kernel is too much. And what will happen is, if you leave it like that, you harvest it and you leave it like that, it'll mold. And I had a buddy, Brent, his daddy passed away, and it was up to him to finish the harvest. And he called me and he goes, "Can you drive the truck for me?" I said, "Sure, Brent, but buddy, I think it's way too early to harvest." And I said, "If you want to run some grain off, I'll take it to the mill and they'll test it for you for free, you know." And he goes, "No, I've been doing this all my life. I know it when it's ready." It's like, okay, dude. So he did. He got the combine. I had the truck out there, and he filled that first wagon full. And I said, "I'll be right back." And I took off and I went to town to the mill. And the moisture content, I think, was 10. They won't take it unless it's 3 or less. So they wouldn't take it, and they sent me back. Well, of course, Brent has been filling the hopper up on the combine while I was gone. He wasn't just sitting still. He combined another load. So in a perfect world, I would come back empty and he would fill me up, and I would go, and we'd just do that until we were done. I came back and I had the truck and trailer still parked off. And he goes, "You didn't unload?" I said, "No, Bubba. I told you that I thought it was too wet." I said, "It's a 10, man. They won't take it unless it's 3 or less." And he said, "Well, I guess we get to turn it in the trailer with a shovel." I said, "Oh, we don't."
You got a mouse in your pocket?
I said, "I tried to tell you. You said you knew. You got a combine full and a truck full. Have a party. Call me when it's really ready." I left. But so there is a time after the plant dies before you can even harvest. So in that boot stage, though, is called a bead. Did you find a chart out there? Oh, okay. All right, that's okay.
And he showed it to us not too long ago.
Yeah. So the fast ends tonight, the fast of unleavened bread. And how many people made it through unleavened bread without eating something you shouldn't have.
Good job.
It was hard.
We found a box of stuffing halfway through the week.
Oh.
We screwed up. First night in the hospital, we're getting cheeseburgers.
Yeah, 'cause they had me on a liquid diet. You cannot maintain my physique on a liquid diet. You just can't. I tried, but I looked at Terry's data and it was about 10 o'clock. The grill closes at 11. I said, you want to run down and get us a couple of hamburgers?
Thought you did, yeah. Sure.
Sure.
Halfway
So she
through.
did, and let me tell you, that hamburger was like a ribeye, man. Oh, it was so good, wasn't it?
Oh, it was delicious.
The next day, I was going to send her for hamburgers again that evening because she still got me on this limited fiber diet by then or something. And then I thought, oh my God, it's unleavened bread.
Uh-huh.
So she got the beef and bean burritos. And I said, I got the scours bad enough. Do you know that these beans are clean?
Probably not.
Yeah, halfway through the burrito, I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't be eating this.
I didn't eat mine right
Cause
now.
Not vegetarian beans in
Yeah,
here.
because they're made in lard. Yeah, they're cooked in lard.
But isn't it funny how that's the way sin is in our lives? It becomes such a normal thing. And remember, sin isn't necessarily evil. It's just things outside the covenant. But how comfortable we've become with sin, that it's just a normal thing.
That was, Raina had been doing sourdough bread, and you leave the dough out and the yeast from the air gets into it. So this year we talked about that we live in a fallen world. The yeast is all around us.
Right.
We can't really be free of the fallen state of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good.
Yeah, it's in the air.
It's in the air, yeah.
Yeah.
We went to Chile, and we always get the fajitas, but some tortillas have yeast in them. We actually asked them, and she went and asked the manager. He printed out and came out and showed us there's no yeast.
Oh.
We wouldn't eat the tortillas until we
Pretty
knew.
sure.
Yeah.
We actually were gonna do like corn tortillas, but they were out of the corn tortillas. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I like the flour ones better. We have the ingredients. They
But-
did it.
Awesome.
You know, and that actually served as an opportunity to talk to somebody because I asked him, you probably never had this request before. He goes, no, what's this all about? Then we went into it and he was just like, wow. He was kind of like, it kind of opened up his eyes and, you know,
Yeah.
because he's heard of Passover, obviously, but he didn't understand unleavened bread.
Right.
So,
And the Orthodox, and Nicole, you can correct me maybe if I'm wrong, but like the days of unleavened bread, the Orthodox call it Passover, like the third day of Passover or the second day of Passover. Well, the second day of Passover is a high Shabbat, it's unleavened bread, but they don't really call it unleavened bread, they call it the days of Passover. So, but it's the same thing.
We don't eat, well, oats, barley, rice, spelt, wheat. And that's a mess. But there's another thing, kidney oat, I don't know if I'm saying it right. At some point, the rabbis decided that also corn, beans, and rice, unless you're Sephardic. If you're Sephardic, you eat rice and beans. So they declared, but that wasn't agreed upon by all the different
Sects.
some feel like it was too prohibitive. So that's a really limited diet, if you don't eat any of that.
Right.
With the kids.
you're going to die.
And at our house, we just get rid of the yeast. Like things with baking powder in them, I think it's baking powder in it that causes things to rise.
Yeah.
It's a chemical reaction. It's not a living organism like yeast. So I don't throw out the things with,
Now, if you get Passover food, like It's baking.
Yeah.
But without corn, it's Passover baking. It's a whole industry.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I chuckle too, because on the matzo packages, it says kosher for Passover. Well, kosher really only has to do with meat, really. It's not, you know. I had a guy try to tell me that mushrooms and broccoli were unclean. And I told him, I said, you can't say it's unclean just because you don't like it.
Well, the Passover matzah is under strict, you know, they go through the whole plan and the timing, because it's 18 minutes from starting it to finishing it.
Yeah.
So that's, and then some only eat a certain Passover matzah that comes from Jerusalem
Why does it have to be 18?
before 11.
It starts to rise.
It
Yeah.
starts, you have 18 minutes to do.
So it doesn't
start
pull
to
the
11.
yeast from the
Oh,
air.
from the air.
So you gotta keep it moving.
You gotta keep it-
That's a
Yeah.
little too much for me. It's a little terrace, too much for terrace.
Well, those matzah that you got for Passover, Priscilla, I like those better than what we usually get. We usually get the blue package, but it was like, these are actually good. The ones we get taste like cardboard, you know?
Walter's eating them while you're doing your speaking.
You put it in front of me.
And then you can make matzo crack, right?
Yeah.
With chocolate. Oh, Lord, that's good. So, anything else? Okay.